thank you, Lucy-Anne. Good morning to everyone and Happy New Year to those I haven't said Happy New Year to, if it's not too late in January to say that. I never know when to stop saying it. Anyway, Happy New Year. Let's start off with any apologies, please, Lucy-Anne. Thank you for that. Can we just look at the minutes of the previous meeting first of all? For any factual corrections on there. Does anyone have any? Okay, I'll take that as a no then. Any notes or matters arising from the minutes as a second point? I think I just had a couple. I think the early years task and finish group were planning a meeting. I'm not sure if that's been set up, if a date's been set for that yet.
Yes, that has been.
That has been. Okay, that's done. There was an error on the growth fund, I think Darren pointed out, and that's been amended. I think that's all been corrected now, so that's fine. Thank you, Catherine. Jonathan, I think when we were talking about some SEN, I asked about parents being kept informed about, or schools being kept informed so we can enhance communication to parents. Has that started or is that that's underway?
There's still a communication plan which is still having the finishing touches put to it at the moment. So we'll communicate that in due course. It's almost ready to go, but not quite. So we'll share that with schools very, very soon. Lovely,
that's good news. And then I think the other one was the task and finish group were meeting in January to discuss the budget, which I'm sure has been done because we're going to cover that as a later item. So I think that was all. I didn't have any other points on there. No one else had any other items.
Deborah,
can we move on? Yep.
Oh, sorry, I did spot something. Sorry. On page 11.
Yes.
This could be correct. It says, and one of the bullet points, if the high needs block deficit was not eliminated through joint effort, it could escalate to £56.
Whereabouts on page 11 are we looking?
In the bullet points, and it's the third bullet point up. Yeah, that's what I was wondering. 56 isn't too bad, is it?
I was going to say, if it's £56, we're all happy and we can probably go home now, can't we?
Yeah,
so that's
happy
fine.
days.
Yeah. What safety valve, eh? Yeah. Thank you, Karina.
Okay.
Good point. Good point on there. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Next item. No, thank you. Let's move on to the main business then. I think the first item, Catherine, one of your many items. Let's move over to you for the revenue monitoring report, please.
Yes, thank you. I'll just quickly share my screen. There's no change actually. So this is quite a quick one to go through. The only change was the growth fund. So we've just updated that to reflect the contingency that we were holding. It was for 7 months. So we've obviously reduced that because if classes are going to start now, it's going to be only 3 months. So we've reduced that down so that there is now with using less of the reserves for growth funds this year. So there's more to carry forward to next year. So that's got a knock-on impact to next year that we don't have to take as much from the schools block to cover the growth fund. So that was a good thing. That we updated that. Yeah. So so the deficit has just changed by that amount, but so we've still got 19.7 cumulative deficit in the year. And I think the attachments were missing from the agenda, but I've got them here if we need to send them out, Lucy-Anne, separately, but I've had the appendices separately if anyone needs to see those.
Yeah, if we could perhaps have those sent out as with the minutes of this meeting, that would be handy, or before if Lucy-Anne's able to, that would be good. Any questions for Catherine on the revenue monitoring report? So it's good news that it stayed the same and that changed the growth fund. So I think that's positive news on there. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Catherine. We'll get on to the more interesting bits with future budgets in a short while as well. At the last meeting, we had a discussion about the solar PV, and I think we've got Sarah Morgan and Ian Goff here to talk us through the solar energy position really with Wokingham and to explain to schools. And I know we've probably got some questions, but if I hand over to Sarah and Ian.
Yeah, good morning everybody. Thanks very much for having us. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Morgan. I'm the Assistant Director of the Commercial Property team at Wokingham, and the Energy team, of which Ian Goff, who many of you will know, is the Energy Manager, sits in my department, and Ian's with us on the call today. I'm also joined by Graham Cadle, who's the Assistant Director of Finance at Wokingham. So if there are any questions on the wider financial implications, then Graham's here. We weren't able to prepare, I'm afraid, a written report in advance. I have got just a small number of slides that I'd just like to go through, and then I'll send them to Lucianne to be circulated after this meeting as a sort of a written record of the presentation. But really, the purpose of this is, I know this is a topic that schools have been talking with Ian and his team over the last sort of 12 months or so. And there were a number of questions raised at the previous forum meeting before Christmas. So it's an attempt to answer those questions and give as much clarity as possible where there was still some uncertainty of the implications. So I'll just share my screen. It's probably I'll try and make it 5 minutes maximum, so not too long. And this is the non-technical version. I am not an energy professional, so I'm going to try and put it in the most simplistic words that I can, that I can understand as well. So that's the aim of the presentation, at least. So I'll just share my screen there. I hope you can all see it. Apologies, I can't see anything when I'm sharing my slides. So if anyone puts their hand up or anything like that, then we'll try and get to the end and then have questions at the end. So really, that's just what I've just gone through in terms of what we are going to be covering. I just wanted to do a quick recap really about our investment in renewable energy in schools. That started back in 2012. That's when we started looking at capital works in schools, and that has been supplemented further or reinforced really by the declaration of our climate emergency in 2019. And the Climate Emergency Action Plan has specific actions relating to generating more renewable energy, and a particular action relating to engaging with young people and supporting sustainable schools. So that's sort of the environmental climate emergency objectives of why we are investing. You can see there that we've actually spent over £4 million in school sites, 55 school sites. Solar panels is one of the things that we do, but other renewables in terms of LEDs, lighting, insulation, building fabric, building management system. One of the questions that we have had is around sort of the funding and what happens to the money generated. Well, these are what we call investor save projects from the perspective of the Borough Council. So there is the principle that, as well as generating all of the environmental benefits, that our capital investment will be paid back to us over a period of time, and we set that at 25 years. So for each investment that we make, we need to be able to make sure that the energy that's generated, that's then retailed, we will get that payment back in 25 years' time, at least. I don't need to dwell too much on this. We'll all know from our own domestic circumstances where energy prices have gone, but just wanted to it's really important because why are we making this change is really driven by the context of increased energy prices. We have seen energy prices for gas go up by nearly 400%, 200% for electricity, caused by global demand, conflict, and the trading conditions that results in. Our own electricity contract, the WBC corporate electricity contract, we have seen that increase itself by 47% over the last 5 years. So even when we are buying in that market, with our economies of scale, we are not immune from these increases. So it's really important that we keep this in mind, because one of the questions that we got from before Christmas was, who's ordered this change and why are we doing it? Well, the why is we are trying to, as far as possible, protect both the Borough Council but also schools from these increases. They are reality. We can't do anything about that, but the change that we're proposing is trying to mitigate as far as possible ourselves from these increases by looking at utilising and retailing the energy that the solar panels generate in a different way. Somebody asked around, I'm just going to go through a case study here. It's an anonymised one, but it is a real school that Ian has worked on for me, just to work through as an example. I've found working through that has really helped. One of the questions that we got asked was, is it different for academies from maintained schools? The difference in that is about the process of charging. So what we're proposing in terms of the values will be the same for maintained and academy schools, but the process of how we charge, maintained schools go through Business Well Done, academies we invoice. That's the only difference, but we are looking at parity and fairness across the board and not having a difference between the two. So if we just work through an example, and I hope this will help people understand the changes that we're proposing. It certainly did for me, and I thank Ian for his patience as I worked it through with him. So in the existing arrangement where we are now, if we have a school and we have invested over the last 3 years £80,000 in solar panels. They have 195 panels installed, and they are generating those panels 35% of the energy that the school needs. In no circumstances on any schools are the panels producing everything that a school needs, but they can produce a significant contribution. In the existing scenario where we are now, 90% of the energy that those panels generate is exported to the grid. The Borough Council sells that energy to the grid and an income comes in. The remaining 10% of the energy is utilised on site by the school. So that's where we are now. So we've got 90% going to the grid, 10% to the school. That 10% that the school is using is at nil cost, but obviously it's only a small proportion of your overall energy need. So the rest of the energy is what we call imported energy for over 90% of what you're consuming, and that at the moment is at 25p per kilowatt hour. So in this scenario, for this school, their total energy bill on electricity with those two elements, solar and imported, is at £37,800 per annum. What we're proposing is the scenario for the school remains the same, but this middle bit in the middle is really important. This is where the change is. What we're proposing is actually we retain 90% of the energy generated by the solar panels the school use, and we only retail 10% out to the grid. So much more staying in the school site, much less going out to the grid. What will happen then is that solar energy, whereas it was free before, it's now being proposed to charge at 17p per kilowatt hour, which is still significantly less than your imported energy if you were buying it, which would be at 25p. So whilst your solar energy bill is going up, it's not going up as much as because you're utilising 90% of that on site. So your imported energy bill goes down. And in the scenario of this school, you can see there's a reduction of £2,650 per annum to the school by doing this change. So whilst your solar is now more expensive, you're utilising a lot more of it, and it's substantially cheaper than the imported energy that you're buying. So there's a financial benefit to the school, and there's an increased income to WBC, which helps us with our payback of the capital investment that I referenced before. So what I really want to get across is this is a way of us trying to mitigate against these increased prices from imported energy by the schools being able to utilise much more of the energy that they're generating on site themselves. And that does also help increase the self-sufficiency and the resilience of the school, because you're utilising energy that you are producing, and particularly if you have battery storage as well, that will really help that resilience. Just looking at my notes. I wanted to people ask what happens if schools don't decide or agree to switch to these different proposed charging arrangements. What will happen is the energy arrangements and the charging will stay as they are. So the utilisation of the solar will remain, 90% will continue to be exported to the grid, and you'll be utilising around 10% of what you've got. Ultimately, if in that scenario, our advice is that you will not be utilising or maximising the solar energy that your panels are generating, and you will be topping up with more expensive energy that you're importing. That is your choice. One of the questions that we got asked was, are our current contracts still valid? Why do we have to sign new contracts? You're all on slightly different contracts, depending on when in the last decade you have signed up to this agreement. So there are individual circumstances. If you don't want to change, then you will stay on your existing contract, but that is the arrangement that you see here. That's your choice to make, but that's why we would encourage you, for the reasons I've just set out, to look at changing. But if your existing contract will remain if that's what you choose to do. We had a discussion, or it had been referenced, about whether we would cable away the energy that is generated if schools don't want to try and make this change. Now, we've had further discussions there. We've looked at it a bit more. We think that is very difficult, actually, from a feasibility and practical point of view. So we are not going to propose doing that, but the scenario would be that you stay on your existing contract at the costs that you are currently incurring. And I'd like to think that financial implication is sort of the carrot to encourage people to switch if they need to. If you don't have any renewable energy generation on your site currently at the moment, then you're 100% reliant on the imported energy, and your existing contract charge stays at 25p per kilowatt hour. And even within the contract that the council has got, there will likely be price rises in that over the years. So that's where you are. So if you don't have any of that renewable energy technology already, please come and talk to us, and we would really encourage you to do that. In terms of implementation, we have some schools already signed up. The energy team have been working hard with you on individual energy forecasts for each school. I would really encourage you, if you haven't had that yet and had that conversation with Ian and his team, to do that. All of your circumstances are slightly different, so Ian can work through the individual requirements of the team. We would really like to regularise this approach through the signing of a new contract. It's really important for both sides. This is a substantial amount of money that we're talking about, and it is a formal contract. So we would really encourage the signing of the new contract if you choose to do that, so that we're clear where we are contractually, and then the charging approach will just be applied through Business Well Done. As I said, if you decide to not make the change, you remain on your existing charging arrangements, but that ultimately is more expensive for you. We did get a few questions about the energy team, which I'd just like to sort of address, actually. And as you know, you pay a fee of 2% for the works that the energy team does. Effectively, the energy team are providing the function of procuring your energy supplies. And in doing so, that gives you access into the WBC energy contract. And you can see then the numbers on your screen in terms of that energy contract does allow access to lower energy rates. So they are there to procure that energy for you, to manage the works, to make sure that you are energy compliant and legislatively compliant, and just identify the opportunities for savings. So they are there to support you and provide a function for you. We were asked how much that fee it generates. It generates approximately £80,000 per annum by that commission fee. And that is a contribution both to staffing costs to pay for the people who are providing that service, but also we then reinvest that revenue that's generated to allow us to further invest in schemes. So I hope that gives a little bit of clarity as to why. Obviously, you don't have to use them, but if you don't, then you will need to be able to do that function yourself, or somebody else to do it for you in terms of procuring your energy supplies. And that's really it. It's a bit of a whistle-stop tour. I will share the slides afterwards, but I don't know. Hopefully, I've managed to answer the questions that were posed to us. But happy to take questions if there's time, Chair. Or what I would say is some of the circumstances are very individual to the schools, and it might not be appropriate to go into that level of detail per school in this forum. But if there are general questions and principles, then happy to take questions on that.
Thank you, Sarah, for that presentation. I see we've got some hands up already. Can I go to Ian first of all? I think you were first up with a question.
Thanks. I suspect my question's probably for Ian, actually. It's a good presentation, by the way. I think that's great. I have a bit of a concern that looking at the cost of energy seems to be the only game in town. We should be looking at why we're using so much energy in the first place, and a lot of it will, of course, be down to the fabric of the buildings that we're using. A lot of our schools are quite old and traditionally built, and they have what's called a traditional, the technical term is a cold flat roof. When we come to change the fabric that goes over the top of the roof, we should take the opportunity to change those to warm flat roofs, and that the cost of just putting a new fabric on, and as opposed to putting the fabric on and putting the insulation that goes with it, is not that much, and it will reduce the need to spend all that energy in the first place. It was recently done on 9 Mile Ride School, so if anybody wants to see what it looks like, that's a good place to go and look at. I'm just concerned that we just look at energy usage, energy cost, whereas we should be looking at the energy lost and why we're using that so much. Have we got a team that's looking at that at the same time as well?
Yeah, in short, Ian, yeah, we'll look at any energy reduction projects across the board. So, I mean, Sarah alluded to the fact that we're looking at insulation projects of the like that you've just mentioned, you know, building energy management systems, controls, etc., etc. We will look at every type of energy reduction project. Yeah, and we're working hand in hand with the operational property team to embed, you know, if they're doing works for, I don't know, a re-roofing project like you've discussed, we'll look at how do we put our money into that to make it more thermally efficient. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're getting grants, various grants in to help us with solar panel installations. Are we getting similar sorts of grants to help us change from cold roofs to warm roofs?
So it's going to work on a very similar system. Wherever we do invest money, we will look for, you know, that investment to be returned in terms of a rate of return on the investment. And so basically, but that is easier for the school to achieve because, for instance, you know, with a lighting project, we come out, we rip all the old lighting out, that has a cost associated to it. We replace with a new lighting equivalent that has a dramatically reduced cost associated to it, and we can, you know, we ask for a rate of return against that. But yeah, essentially, and we've got a team ready and raring to go in that respect, and we've always worked with schools along the lines of, you know, energy reduction. The way I see it is energy reduction first. So we talked a little bit about self-sufficiency. Yeah.
That's what I wanted to hear. Energy reduction first, and then we look at the costs, the residual costs. Thank you very much.
And renewable energy generation second, and then grandiose schemes to fill the void. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Carol, I think you were next up with a question.
Okay. First of all, I have to say that over the years we've had some really good support from Ian and his team in terms of lighting replacement and air heat pumps for the swimming pool, but I'm still very confused by this solar. And the example that Sarah gave has probably confused me even more, because it's implying that we are currently paying for our solar energy. Is that correct?
No, your energy your solar energy currently is at nil cost, but you are only utilising 10% of what is being generated at the school, and the rest is being exported. And what the suggestion is that you utilise significantly more, up to 90% in the school, but then there is a cost associated with that. But that is at 17p, which is substantially less than your imported cost at 25p.
Okay, well that then completely contradicts the contract that we signed in 2012 that said that we got the full use of our solar energy. So does that mean we've been overcharged since 2012? Because it kind of sounds like that to me. And the other thing is, I've been asking since January last year for this worked example of what the actual implications to our school and our budget. And I know many of my colleagues have been doing the same, and we haven't had it yet. And perhaps if we'd had it slightly before now, we would have better understood our own individual circumstances, and this wouldn't have been such a shock. I did email round, and not one single school that's responded has had their energy forecast yet. We've got P9 budget monitoring to do. Apparently we're going to be charged for this electricity moving back to the start of last year. We none of us know where we are, so I'm not really sure this has helped. I'm sorry.
So on that front, Carol, we do have forecasts. We have them ready and raring to go. They'll come hand in hand, sadly, with the bill. So we needed to work that through, and sadly this comes down to the fact that many schools, whilst we talk generally in the presentation, and I've spoken generally in terms of the solar PV mechanism in the past, there are quite a lot of nuances on each individual site to that generalisation. So we've had to work through that, which has taken us a bit of time, sadly, but we do have that ready and raring to go, and should be being provided. I know that some schools have categorically had that information.
Ian, is it possible for you in particular to pick up with Carol outside of this session? We've talked previously. I know you've been having one-to-one sessions with schools. Sorry, you know, half an hour to go through their individuals. Could we do that as a matter of urgency and quickly, not wait for bill time or forecasting time? That would be really beneficial, because I do think being able to sit down and work through it on your own individual basis is really important.
Yeah.
Okay. There were a couple of schools.
Sorry, can I just say that's great, that's wonderful, and that feels to me a little like I'm getting special treatment because I'm sitting on forum, which doesn't feel so good. Many of my colleagues feel exactly the same way.
I don't think you are getting special treatment, Carol. So don't worry. You know, if people are approaching Ian and his team, then they are doing that with him. Sorry, Ian, talking on your behalf. So let's just make sure. There were a couple of other schools that approached us on the back of the last session. So Ian, if we can just check that we've picked those up proactively and having that conversation, let's do that.
Andy, I think you were next.
Deborah, thank you very much indeed. Sarah, thank you very much for your presentation and sending out the slides later. It's much appreciated to give that clarity here. I just wanted to say I think it's a great relief in some way to understand that you don't have to sign up for the contract, that we can opt out for this. It doesn't feel so much like a fait accompli, and I think that gives some reassurance as well. And I agree with Carol just sort of saying a very good point there. Having the details before you sign the contract, so you're aware about what you're signing into and the implications of it, I think that would be very useful. One of the things I just wanted to ask you, apologies if you said this, Sarah, and explained it, with the 17p, is that an actual amount, or is that an amount because it's a percentage reduction from the overall charge which a school could expect? So basically, if it is a percentage, could we see that 17p could be 18p, but it's still 30% reduction if prices were to increase?
I know I've learned a lot over the last few weeks, Andy, but I'm going to refer to Ian to answer that question.
Yeah, so the reason we settled on 17 pence per kilowatt hour is it's a 30% reduction on our charged rate for energy import. And we've said in the letter that we sent out that we will always look to maintain that 30% differential. In other words, we're 30% cheaper than our available market rate. Yeah, so as Sarah's case study alluded to, it's 25 pence for every kilowatt hour that you procure, other than through the PV that we've got on your roof line, which is 17 pence. That can change in the future, but we will always look to make it 30% cheaper than our contract rate.
No, that's lovely and clear. So as on that rather scary graph that you show, Sarah, where the world's going in the wrong direction with prices, then we'll be 30% whatever rate is being charged at that particular time on the open market. No, that's very clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Liz, you're next with the question.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, like you said, I think that case study or just having our individual scenarios would have really helped us decide whether to take up that contract. The contracts started, your contract that was being bandied around was from the 1st of April. How does it work now once we get once we finally get our forecast? How does that work? Because you're saying that we're getting a bill coming, which is after our forecast has to be into education finance. But how will that work if we decide to take up the thing once we get our final forecast?
Ian, do you want
So,
to?
yeah, so I mean, in short, when we sent out the letters to all schools, I can't remember when that was exactly, but it was a while back now, and we did start talking about this well over a year ago. We said that, you know, effectively schools would get the bill in October of last year. We very specifically haven't sent that out, but it's ready and raring to go now. So the ambition is that we do that, and that does relate to the 6-month period before that. So effectively, the charging period started in April of last year. Yeah, so I mean, cut a long story short, that is ready and raring to go, and we'll look to get it out as quickly as we possibly can do.
So we're going to get a bill backdated to April last year. And it's going to hit us after we've done our forecasting, right at the end of budget, right at the end of year end.
Yeah.
Graham, do you have anything to say about that for schools finance?
I think, Ian, can we just take this offline? I think we just need to look at timing of when things are being issued, and if people are aware of what's coming. Yeah. I think we just need to understand. In generality, it should be a good news story in the sense that we're saying that this actually should decrease your bill. But I think we just need to check. Can we just take that offline and check our timing of when we're issuing bills relating to forecasting?
Not if anyone's, but if we haven't signed up to the contract because we haven't had this information yet, then it won't be a saving, will it? It'll just be a charge.
Can I ask what people have estimated at the moment? Have they just used what are current estimates based
We've
on?
only been going on our actuals. We've had no information from energy team for the whole year that all schools have been asking for. And as Carol said, we've got a big network of school business managers, and I don't think anyone's received any information. After being told to ask lots of times, every forum we come to or every school finance, it says just email for energy team. Sorry, Ian, but we have had a lot of support from you, and I really think the team are great, but on this scenario it's been very frustrating.
I think I'd back that up, Liz, with the contract that came out to all schools didn't clarify. In fact, Sarah's presentation this morning has helped to show exactly how it's going to work, particularly that middle section with the 90%, 10%. I think we need a more detailed contract so we know exactly what we're signing. We need that presentation or the details of it included in the contract. We need the charging points and any credits that might be offered, because there's no mention of that. So if it goes back to the 1st of April for schools, are we going to be credited for the amounts that were previously paid and then recharged on the new figures? That we need that clarity before anyone can sign. And it's just worth noting as well that when it's dealing with academies and multi-academy trusts, it's not the individual schools, it's just the multi-academy trust that is the contracting body. So they were the ones that would need to sign the contract on behalf of all of their schools. Sorry, Ian, I jumped in ahead of you there. You had a question.
Yeah, hi. So not necessarily to do with any solar aspects, but on behalf of early years settings, is it possible for early years settings to get involved with what is looks like a brokered service in terms of energy?
I'm not sure. I don't understand.
Well, you've got an energy, you've got a borough-wide energy contract where it looks like you're offering energy at a certain price, which looks like it's discounted to what maybe I could buy energy at if I go to the energy companies. So like you've got academies where you're invoicing energy for energy, can early years settings maybe get involved with that?
Yeah, of course. It would depend. Where are you getting your energy from at the moment, Ian?
Well, we just go out to the standard retail market. So
yeah, yes, more than happy to help in that respect, Ian. Yeah, categorically we can help and bring your energy costs down quite significantly.
Fantastic. So
is there apologies because I just don't quite know the structure, etc. Ian, is there sort of a rep from the early years setting that we could use as a point of contact, or would we go and talk to each individual early years setting? How would be the best way for Ian to kind of work through that as a.
Well, I'm the early years rep on Schools Forum. I'm in contact with the majority, and if we can organise something, then we can push information out to all of the early years providers via the early years team.
Okay, lovely. So if we can take an action for Ian and Ian to maybe get together outside of this forum and have that initial discussion and work out how we can access the other providers.
Super, thank you.
Yeah.
Chris, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. So just to clarify, and thank you, Sarah, for the presentation. It's really helpful. We're a school that have benefited massively from the energy team, windows, control systems, insulation, and LED lights. So it's been fantastic. I just got slightly confused on the last point about the, obviously the signing of the contract. So I understand now how that contract works. The billing, which has just thrown me. I thought the bill that's coming in to us very soon, ready to go, I think was your words, Ian, that is on the current terms, the 25p tariff backdated to April, not the new tariff with the 17p on the 90%.
No,
because the forecasting we've got in, because I can understand everybody's frustration and concern that we're all here ready to do our P9 forecasting. I'm assuming that my forecasting is in line with the forecast that you provided to me at the beginning of the last financial year.
Let's make sure we're not talking at cross purposes here, Chris. So for the energy that you bring into site through the Crown Commercial Service current contract, that's at 25 pence per kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
The energy that you get from the solar PV, this is the change that we're looking at doing. We're trying to skew that more to the schools than less to the schools. Will be a charge at 17 pence per kilowatt hour.
Yeah, but the bill that's coming through that's backdated, what does that reflect?
Will be at for the solar PV, for the energy from the solar PV will be at 17 pence per kilowatt hour.
If we have, but if we've signed it.
If you've signed the contract, yes.
Yeah. So if we haven't, so there's a lot of people still haven't signed the contract. That bill that's sitting and ready and waiting to go, what's it got on it? The 25p or the 17p?
So effectively, the way that the system works at the moment is scenario A in Sarah's presentation. Effectively, you're not getting a massive amount of energy from the PV on your sites, and we're trying to turn that around.
Yeah, but it sounds to me that it can't be ready and waiting to go unless you know what our position is.
From PV, Graham, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, from solar energy from PV, I don't think we'd ever look to charge at 25 pence. We'd only ever look to charge at 17 pence.
No, Ian, it's because at the moment we're charging at 0. We're saying in the new regime we're charging at 17, and the concern is that the bill may say we're charging at 17 when people have not agreed yet to that change. So they want to know whether they're being charged at 0 or at 17, depending on where they are in the process of agreeing the change. I think we need to go away, and for each school, and I think we need to go through and say, have they agreed? Have they signed the contract? And therefore what their charging is and what the bill's going to say, because it will be different for everybody because everyone's in a different scenario. So I think that's where the confusion is where you are in the process of changing, what's your bill going to say? Is that?
Yeah, thank you.
That's the question.
Exactly my point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Carol, you've got a follow-up question?
I'm just raising the point that we haven't actually had any energy bills since October. And the latest reports that we've had, we had the October invoices, got nothing since. There's so much delay. I just feel completely in the dark on this one.
Ian, do we bill on a quarterly basis?
No, we don't. No, Carol, certainly for your site, it's monthly. Have you been in contact with Hoyt in that respect, or the energy team in that respect?
No, I haven't. But I'm paying for the service. I shouldn't be having to chase for bills.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, I honestly can't. It's dreadful to get caught out like this, but I can't comment as to why you haven't had your bills. I need to check. I need to find out, and I will come back to you. I've got a meeting to get a note for myself to get a meeting in with you, Carol, and I'll check out on the energy bills at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, any further questions for Sarah or Ian on this point? I think if we could just, in summary, if we could have your presentation, Sarah, which was very useful, and then if we can, obviously the work with individual schools, but I think if we are going to have the contract sent out again to schools to see if they're interested in signing, we need a lot more detail in that contract. There was a schedule at the back of it. I think it just said Schedule A or Schedule 1, but there's no details of how the charging would take place. And I think we need clarity on perhaps using different scenarios, as you did with your presentation. If you're a school that's signed up to the contract, this will be the situation. If you're not, if you've got solar PV, the different examples which would make it clear for the individual schools as well.
Yeah, absolutely, we can do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Ming.
Just be careful, I'm not a solar energy expert or whatever. I just wanted thought. I think also Graham Cato's involvement in Sarah's service work, Deborah just outlined, is very important to look at individual schools' impact, financial impact, and then individual school know where they are, whether any unexpected impact on individual school or not. So Graham Cato finance service involvement in this is also very important. Just like to add on what Deborah just said. Yeah.
Thank you, Ming. Thank you. Prue, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Deborah. It just occurred to me that there's no point in people going away and drawing up a letter and a contract thing and sending it out if it's not going to do what people want. So I was going to suggest that maybe yourself could be involved in and consulted as to when that's put together, whether it looks like what schools would like to see. Is that possible? Yes, absolutely. So that Sarah and her team are not sending something out which doesn't hit the spot again. I think everybody's grasped the fact that the new contract would actually be financially advantageous. So I think we've got that, but it's the implications for each school and understanding that, and also understanding what's happened with the billing to date and how they do the billing in the future. But there's also something in there about how we talk to schools about things that are not educational, as it were. And very interestingly for me, the early years bit, that we've got a huge gap in how the council deals with things. So this could have been on offer to all sorts of early years providers, and we just didn't know. And somehow we need to avoid that. But it's very good to see that we can link up with them and see what we can offer them, because I'm sure they're all struggling at the moment just as much as schools are with the energy bills. So I think this has been good. I thought Sarah's presentation was very clear. I understood it, so that's good. I come to it, and I'm not a solar power expert either. But I hope we can sort this out, because I think the aim is to make bills cheaper for schools, which I think everybody is in favour of. I hope, anyway.
Yes, thank you, Prue. Sarah.
Yeah, I think if we've done anything today, if we've established that principles or people understand the rationale behind the change, I think what I'm hearing from this conversation is much more work and detail needed on implementing the change and the billing. So if we've made progress on the first thing, which hopefully, as Prue said, we have done, and there's an understanding of the rationale and the why, now we've got to really focus on the implementation, and I will take very seriously those actions that we've discussed about getting that information and going through that.
Thank you, Sarah. That will be useful. Thank you. Any further questions from anyone on solar PV, energy generally? Sarah, Ian and Graham, thank you very much for the presentation and the information.
Thank you.
Right, can we move on now to the next point, which is inclusion funding? Jonathan, I think it's over to you.
Hi everyone. I'll just check with you, Deborah. This is a specific item related to a budgetary matter which is coming in for a matter of due principle. I could also do a quick update on safety valve more broadly, but I don't know if there'll be time to do that. I could either send that round or do it at the tail end of my session. I'll go as fast as I can and perhaps check in with you.
I think it would be useful if we could have a quick update on safety valve. That would be really useful for forum. So if we can squeeze it in, that would be great.
So I'll start with the specific item and then I'll move on to the wider update. I'll share my screen. So I'm here with a proposal regarding our exceptional needs funding, which is the exceptional needs funding panel is a head teacher led panel which has been meeting since 2012 with a pot of high needs funding they have been allocating for individual pupil support at pupils below education, health and care plan level, with the intention either of meeting needs because that child's a new arrival or because those needs could be addressed and perhaps minimise the need for EHC plans. They have £150,000 a year budget, have had for some years. That's approved by Schools Forum, or it's supported by Schools Forum. It's very well represented in terms of head teacher engagement there. Most of that money has been in the last few years passported across to Addington to fund their outreach program, and they were doing. I think the panel decided to do that because at that time there was no outreach program available, so they wanted to fund that. That left them with a 40k budget. Now, on both those fronts, both the Addington money and the 40k individual pupil funding money, that hasn't been fully utilised for the last few years. And I think the panel themselves were conscious of that. There's feedback from some schools saying that either the requirements, the funding requirements, or the terms of reference were not quite clear. So we had a number of requests for funding being bounced back. And I think there was a feeling on the panel and in the wider school community that this wasn't working quite as well as it could. And given where we are with our sort of soaring demand for SEN support and so on, the panel themselves wanted to revisit how this was working and really see whether we could make something more effective or find a more purposeful and targeted way of using the money. So I've been out to the panel themselves. I've not presented here the detail of what the work we've done. We've gone through a lot of discussion around options and so on. But the proposal is, and it's been to the inclusion, the ENF panel has rebranded itself the Inclusion Group. There's been a change of chair this year. So Andy Hinchcliffe is now the chair of this panel. They already have termed themselves the Inclusion Group rather than ENF. They wanted to have that sort of wider agenda or adopt that wider agenda. The suggestion is that we as a council take on the direct commissioning of Addington's outreach as part of our wider programme of outreach. I've been here and discussed our increased investment in outreach previously, and Addington are part of that wider picture. So I think because the ENF itself as a group didn't have the capacity to do the scrutiny and ongoing monitoring of that outreach work, and I think everyone's agreed it makes more sense for our commissioning team to take the lead on commissioning that. So that's already in principle agreed. Then the decision was to, with the other money, rather than focusing on individual pupil funding. Now there is a place for individual pupil funding, but actually it's not having the transformative impact on the system as a whole. I think there are cases where individuals are newly arrived in an area, not necessarily in the early years, but who have either arrived from abroad or come in from other areas, who have clearly got a high level of need but have not got an EHC plan agreed. Rather than waiting for the 20-week process, there are occasions where professionals are agreed that this child clearly needs some additional funding, and to retain that is really important. So we're retaining a block of the funding for that, but that still doesn't speak to the majority of the money. So there was a feeling that we should zoom out slightly and look at whole school and even school cluster approaches, developing new approaches, new practice, new models, new expertise that could be brought in that have a longer term impact, move beyond individual pupils and tying the money to an individual pupil, but looking at whole school systems and so on. So we're proposing development of a high needs innovation fund. This would be aiming for clusters of schools to work together to submit proposals to pilot new models. Alongside that includes, I'll come on in a moment to the priority themes that we've agreed. The feeling was we shouldn't make that a wide open, apply for anything you fancy. We all know what the kind of priority issues are at the moment. There's been a lot of dialogue with schools and with parents and carers. So we thought we need to make sure this is targeted and hits the target in terms of what our local priorities are, so that lessons can be learned and rolled out more widely across the system as a whole. There was a view we need an option for inclusion provision to enable children, young people with social, emotional, mental health needs to access education. That could be around nurture bases. We have other areas, many other areas that have a nurture-based approach more widespread. We do have some schools that do that here, but it's not as widespread as it could be. That can help young people who have been out of school or are struggling to attend and access lessons to have a slightly more domestic kind of approach and more attachment-based approaches to getting them into school and meeting their needs to enable them to access education. We also have the therapeutic thinking, which is the funding for that is which has been centrally funded for some years, is coming to an end. So schools may wish to further develop or extend the therapeutic thinking models that are already in place. A second kind of heading in terms of the priority themes would be looking at the more effective models of transition planning. So that could be what we either work between early years and primary, or between primary and secondary, to get schools to work together to identify ways of making that more that targeting to happen a little earlier and a little more effectively for the most more vulnerable pupils. And finally, also looking at more effective models for reintegration of pupils with SEND who've been out of education, either through emotionally based school avoidance, or those pupils who've been an AP for a short time and are struggling to get back into mainstream. Those priorities, I think most schools I've spoken to have agreed that gives a fairly, it hits the spot in terms of the sort of struggles many schools are facing that are impacting on the system as a whole. So the way the budget would work, or the way the budget's proposed to work, would be we retain 50 what sounds like a very small amount, 15,000 for those newly arrived individual pupils. That doesn't sound like a lot, but historically for the last few years we've never spent more than 13,000 on that particular category of need. So that feels like it won't be any reduction in support. It more than meets the sort of level of support we've needed in previous years. That is restricted to around 2K per individual pupil. But again, it's only about that short-term intervention whilst that child goes through an EHC process. The priority themes, we would retain 45,000 for that, with an indicative threshold of around 15,000 per project to enable groups of schools to work together. This is not huge levels of funding, but it certainly oils the wheels in terms of schools freeing up a member of staff to coordinate and bring that to bear, to bring in training and so on. And that we'd set aside, the capital funding doesn't sit within the governance of Schools Forum, but just to let you know, we've included that within our medium-term financial plan to have a 50,000 allocation for relatively small allocations of around up to 5K per school for minor refurbishment, redecoration, repurposing of existing spaces, or for equipment to enable some of those inclusion bases or nurture bases to be established. So the aims of this broadly are to develop a community of practice by facilitating collaboration. Schools are so hard pressed at the moment. They don't often have that spare staff time to really think about, there are ideas that schools know they want to drive. Many of those ideas on the list I've mentioned there have come from schools we've been in discussion with. So it's about facilitating collaboration. It's all about unlocking school creativity. These are issues we are working with, with colleagues in health. There's lots of system change happening, but we know schools are also full of ideas. And this is about oiling the wheels to enable schools to try some of those things out and establish those new models. And it's about developing resilience and ability to meet presenting needs at an earlier stage, rather than, I think the evidence shows that where you target that money around individual pupils rather than whole school approaches, the longevity of impact is diminished. And actually this is just frees us up to be a bit more flexible in how the money's used. It's been shared with head teachers in the inclusion group. There's been some discussion for a number of months now, and the proposals I'm showing today are agreed and I think fairly widely welcomed. I've not heard anyone that we've been through and hammered out some of the sort of issues around things like the application process. We're making that as light touch whilst also being rigorous. We've also hammered out a matter I did want to present here and highlight here was we are not able to offer this funding for Woking pupils who are attending school outside the area. But what we have to reciprocate with is that if some non-Woking pupils who do not live in Woking but maybe benefit from some of this provision in schools, then we have to accept that's the sort of quid pro quo. But that's the agreement. I think the panel felt that was a fair trade. And obviously pupils attending school outside the area will have access to other forms of support anyway in those areas. The inclusion group are aware I'm bringing this here, hopefully for sign off. there may well be some questions, but hopefully for sign off, as I say, it's fairly widely supported, and we are ready to go in terms of launching this in February. There's been some groundwork done in terms of the establishing the terms of reference and the criteria and so on. We've got a little bit more to do on the application process. We'll meet again with the inclusion group to hammer out the detail around that, but we've got a kind of working model that's underway. So I'll pause there. I'll pause there for any comment or discussion before I go back to the wider safety valve update. Sarah, I can see you've got your hand up.
I can't see that, Jonathan. Anyone?
Oh no, it's gone. I think Sarah's taken it down.
Yeah,
maybe what they call a legacy hand.
Legacy hand, yeah. Ming.
Yeah, it's not a question. I just want to echo what Jonathan just said, that we are working really hard with school leader, with partners, to find what's the best way actually to empower school, to give school the best tool. And we also reviewed how this money was spent in past couple of years, and we found it better to actually let Jonathan describe the ethics of the oil to your machine really. I think for your group work, project work, instead of not that much of money, you just spend 1 or 2 people, that's it. The 3 people can be very high level cost. So this is really something I think we think would be innovative. The school can come up with whatever innovative idea, either in nurture group thinking, traditional thinking or other thinking. This is little actual help for school, a group of school. Also, like enable collaboration between school as well. Instead of spend money that 1 people or 2 people, and then let's end of it. So I think thinking behind this approach. So far, we get the majority of schools support, like Jonathan said. We think it's very important for this forum to endorse this, to notice this development as well.
Thank you, Ming. I mean, Jonathan, it sounds as if there's been an awful lot of discussion by the inclusion group as to come up with this model. Are you looking for forum to agree so you can you move forward with this?
But I mean, it's high needs block, so it's really to seek the view of to endorse the model, to endorse. I mean, obviously, given that the original funding was agreed by Schools Forum, it was only right in terms of governance to come back to you to suggest, to ratify the change.
The use of it. I think probably it's better to ask if anyone has any objections to the inclusion group moving forward with this particular model. No hands up, Jonathan. So I think that's a green light to move forward with this particular plan.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. I'll go back to my presentation and move on. I'll go fairly rapidly through this too. So this is just a wider programme update in terms of our safety valve programme. We've just before Christmas submitted our 3rd return to the Department for Education. So I'm really going to summarise some of the headlines in that return because it only gives a good position. Obviously, the programme's been running now for 9 months. We had the initial agreement in March, and we thought it was a good opportunity to look back at the year and see what's been achieved this year. So there's been a lot of developments in terms of early intervention and demand management. The Vulnerable Learners Panel pilot led to that inclusion group suggestion I've just described to you. We've got our new area, Senko, started work this week, and she's beginning to get out to sort of see the schools and meet the schools. We'll be recruiting 3 seconded Senkos to operate within her team for a day a week too. That adverts for that will come out in the next few weeks. A new outreach model for speech and language, increased investment in our other outreach around social, emotional, mental health and autism. More capacity in the early years, new inclusion training in the early years, and our new local offer coordinator. So an awful lot of activity there. Sufficiency and new provision. I think that's been here well rehearsed. We now have schools we've got two primary schools have agreed and have been awarded the contracts to develop a SEND unit and a SEND resource base to be open by September this year. That's on track. Obviously, the new Addington Special School Satellite opened in October. Oak Tree just opened. The 2 new free schools, everything else. I mean, these are things that have been well rehearsed here previously, but it's just to really highlight how much has happened in the last 9 months, really. And there's also been activity and work around preparation for with the appointment of a new coordinator who will start in around a month's time. There's a lot of work underway also on commissioning in our alternative provision models. We're developing a sort of better quality assurance process for our AP providers. We've contained our demands from our independent sector providers for overinflation uplifts, and we've kept those at a lower level. So we've managed to restrain some of that. You're seeing double-digit increases in independent sector requests in other areas. We managed to contain those locally. So broadly speaking, and also, I mean, I shouldn't undersell from the DfE perspective. The feedback we had was that the agreement for Schools Forum to that 0.5% transfer speaks volumes. Our DfE advisor said that alone will show. The DfE will take that as a very significant shift, given that's quite a change in position compared to previous years. So what we're beginning to see is the elements of things are shifting. It's a slow process. This is a huge change program, but things are beginning to shift in the right direction. We are not quite the spend is not yet in line, and we have had a small amount of slippage compared to our target spend. That's been reported here previously, so that's not news to you. But broadly, in terms of other elements, the requests and reductions, requests for assessment are down 15% on this point last year. So we're seeing the beginnings of the turning the tide in terms of that overwhelming increase in demand in the last 2 to 3 years. There's a broadly 41% of those requests are converting to an EHCP. There's a differential between those that are parent requests and those that come from schools. School requests, more of them are being approved. Parental requests, more of them are being refused, partly because we think there's more can be done at that earlier stage. So, but overall, we're seeing a diminishing of the total number being awarded in the EHCP. We see that as a positive because it means that the needs are being diverted and met at an earlier stage. We're carrying on with an effective program of ceasing EHCPs. I think there can be a tendency in some areas to not cease plans as rapid. When people are getting to the student age and they're at the end of their educational career, that sometimes that the cessations don't happen in quite as timely a fashion as they might. We're making sure we're scrutinising that and making sure people move through the system and get out the other end as quickly as is appropriate. Also, this is a really important headline. 51% of our HC plans are in a mainstream school. That is quite an achievement. And it speaks volumes about the work that's going on in every school in the area. And again, DfE were very, very complimentary about that. We have to ensure we're supporting schools with that increased volume of demand, and hopefully the investment in the services we're talking about is helping to assist that. But we recognise that speaks of the pressure and the hard work going on in all our mainstream schools. And we are on track in terms of our broad number of EHC plans. We're beginning to turn the tide in terms of what were sort of huge, 13, 15, 18% per year increases over the last few years. So we're beginning to see that level out. And the feedback from our DfE advisor was very positive. We haven't had the formal response from DfE yet to that return, but in terms of the verbal feedback was positive, and we're expecting there won't be an issue with that from a DfE perspective. That just shows we've had so far from Safety Valve, the area's received almost 9.2 million, and we're on track to get our next payment of around half a million mark in the next few weeks, I expect. There are undoubtedly, of course, some challenges facing us, and I thought it was worth highlighting those here as well. You'll be aware we have our 2 new special free schools to agree on a shared site. We have asked the DfE for permission for us to run the capital programme because we think we have the best chance of delivering those in time if we run the programme. They have as yet not made a decision on that and deferred the decision on that. The reason they can't even reach a decision is because of the pressure from the RAP concrete emergency. Their capital teams are overwhelmed with demand around that concrete situation, and that is we are basically applying lots of pressure to say, that speaks volumes about your ability to deliver the schools on time. Please hand it over to us. We can go faster, and we think we're confident. So long as they reach that decision rapidly, we are still on track to have those schools open by September 2026, which is it'll take some doing, but it's certainly possible. We are undoubtedly seeing a high level of parental anxiety at the moment. I think this was alluded to earlier when you asked about the parental communication. It's just to say we are seeing increasing rates of mediation, increasing rates of send tribunal, and we know there's a lot of anxiety out in the parent community. We know there's a lot of negative coverage of safety valve as a whole, as a programme. We are really trying to get ahead of that and show that locally this is resulting in significant investment in an improvement in the SEND system. But we have to acknowledge that at the moment we need to do more to persuade the parent community locally that this is a positive change rather than a negative one. And in terms of joint commissioning with health, I know this was mentioned at a last meeting, we are seeking to ensure we get proper contributions from health around our most complex cases. Compared to other areas, we don't receive as much from health as we think we should, and we are certainly working hard on addressing that. And also we're conscious we have a very, very long waiting list for some key services. And again, that ordinarily available health offer locally, the feedback from schools and from families is that it's not where it needs to be. And we are working closely with health to ensure that's taken into account. Those are two areas of key focus in terms of that joined up work with health, but it remains frankly at the moment an area of concern. I will finish there. Again, that was a real whistle-stop tour, but it just gives hopefully a headline. The headlines are, it remains a majorly challenging programme, but we are progressing. We are on track, and we're certainly hearing from the DFE that we are not a cause for concern compared to some other safety valve areas. And there's confidence within the team, within the programme, that we're heading in the right direction. It's a slow-moving thing, but we're beginning to get that and get those early sort of green shoots of progress, as they say. So happy to take any questions.
That's good news, Jonathan. Thank you. Ian, I think you're first with your hand up.
Well, hopefully. Jonathan, thank you very much. You alluded to the fact that we're not getting as much financial support from health as other areas. I wonder if you could just clarify what the problem is, why we're not getting it. Is there a blockage somewhere that we should know about?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of change structurally and at a strategic level in terms of personnel within health. I think historically there's been a precedent that the area's never had a high level of funding around the most complex cases. We are working very hard with partners. We're beginning to make some progress, but we're really trying to change a kind of almost local custom and practice about what health consider they ought to be funding. And benchmarking that with other areas, we are of a strong view that we'll be able to. We have a target in mind in terms of what we think would be an appropriate level. I'm not going to share that publicly, but we are working towards that. And we're getting the right sounds from health, but as yet that hasn't necessarily entirely yet translated into actual contributions. But there's some signs of progress. We'll certainly keep reporting here in terms of how that's going.
Jonathan, just one point from me on your slides, useful information there, but that bit about tribunals, parents going to tribunal, 97% they overwhelmingly find in favour of the parents. That's quite a risk, isn't it?
That's a national figure, not a local one. It's a shocking stat. It's a nuanced area. I think the bottom line is, from a local authority perspective, avoid getting to tribunal at all costs. It's a sign of failure. If you end up at tribunal, it's a sign of failure. Things have gone wrong somewhere. So, but obviously parents can be quite rapidly seek tribunal if they think they're not getting what they want. And frankly, one of the challenges is that parental preference is on a slightly higher. Has huge weighting within the SEND system, and even where professional advice might not quite agree with parental preference, tribunals tend to find in favour of parental preference, and that's again why you're better off if you can agreeing the position before you get to tribunal. So we are seeing an increase in that. It is a cause for concern, but we're not as it has increased in recent months. Given the change we're going through, you might say not entirely surprising, but we don't want to see that really escalate and get out of hand. We need to keep parents on side.
Thank you, Jonathan. Ming.
Thank you, Deborah. Just like Jonathan said, we put a great effort in preventing case go into tribunal by using more mediation. Colleague may already know that let's SEND mitigation regulations come out. It will become legal requirement anyway in September, from September 2024. All cases must go to mediation first before go to tribunal. But we already working in that way. It's really good. So we are also exploring what's the best way we can move more toward preventative measure. So stop the cases go into the tribunal. Jonathan is right. That figure is a national figure, is not a local one.
Thank you. Sarah, you have a question?
Oh, you're
still on mute, Sarah.
Apologies, sorry. Just to say that all the tribunals that we're involved in can't be resolved by mediation because their parents requesting places in our school in Addington and we're full. And that, you know, you can't mediate by saying that you're full. We've just lost a tribunal and we've been directed by Reading to take a pupil at our new early years centre. So it is a huge risk for places in special schools in Wokingham with other authorities, you know, wanting the places. Reading were actually on our side in the tribunal, which I know is quite complex to understand, but they were against the parent, saying that they were going to offer something else, but the tribunal ruled against Reading and Addington. So that mediation, yes, it does. It's very helpful for parents in Wokingham who you can mediate with, but the vast majority at the moment are because we're full and parents want a place and it's their preference.
It's probably worth mentioning
just
too.
Coming, yeah. I think I know that about that individual case. It's really when mediation wouldn't resolve every case, but we were talking about, I think, to try our best, I think, to minimize the number of cases that end up in tribunal. In the end, it wouldn't be 0 tribunals. There will be some tribunal cases that's unavoidable. It's about minimizing it.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think a lot of hard work's obviously been put into safety valve in order to achieve the position that you're at the moment. But I think with some of these risks that we're talking about, it would be useful if we get at the next meeting and we could just hear an update on that and how things are going on that particular area.
Of course, will do.
Are there any other questions for Jonathan on either the inclusion funding or safety valve? Thanks, Jonathan. Let's move on to the next item, which is the high needs block budget update. To you, I think, Catherine.
Yeah, thank you. Just share my screen. So this is just a quick update because we're still working through everything for the high needs block budget. We did get 1.1 million more in for high needs block than we got in last year, which is a good thing, and that helps mitigate that we only received 0.5% transfer from schools instead of the 1% that we built into the safety valve models. So that helped mitigate that. That's good news. So we're just working through what we're going to do with the budget setting. We've got a task and finish group meeting set up for a couple of weeks' time. So Deborah, you're on that as well, aren't you? And Sarah and Karina. So it will be basically going through the guidance, seeing what the DfE said we have to do with our funding. Then we can look at what we'd like to do, and then it's what we can afford to do. So it's just be looking at the HCPs projected going forward from all the work that's been doing on safety valve as well. So it's just making sure we think of everything and put it all in and get a good result out of it, basically, and hopefully we can increase rates to our schools, top up rates to our schools. Hopefully we can afford that. So it's just working through all the figures and all the guidance.
Thank you, Catherine. Yes, I think our meeting's on the 23rd, isn't it? So
yes, that's right.
We'll look at that high needs block at the March meeting.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we'll bring it all forward then. What our final recommended budget assumptions are from speaking to the task and finish group. Yeah.
Thank you, Catherine. I think you're it for the rest of the meeting now. Just looking at the agenda there. So can we move on to the proposed schools block budget submission for 24-25, please?
It's gone very small. So yeah, sure. Okay, so our final allocation came through. Annoyingly, we thought it was going to be the Friday, but it wasn't until the 18th or something of December, the Tuesday before the Christmas break. So we had a lot of work to do in a short space of time to get this all put together. But our figures are pretty much in line to what we estimated at the last meeting. So we had a few variations in pupil numbers to what we had estimated. So it's only 77,000 less than what we thought. So that's not bad on 140 odd million. As we said earlier in the last paper, the revenue monitoring, we've reduced the amount that we're going to put aside for the growth fund as well because of what's happened this year. So that's good news as well. So we've basically went through the consultation. We've done everything that we said and spoke about the task and finish group. We've set MFG at 0.5%. We've used the minimum national funding rates against all the factors that are in the formula, and the disapplication request for the all through score was approved as well. So that's all been factored in to the indicative budgets. We sent the indicative budgets out to schools, I think it was Friday, because unfortunately the lady that puts everything on our website was off sick, so I had to find another route to get someone else to put them on for us, but we've got those out to schools. We've had a couple of comments through, but it was just about rates and things, so nothing major. So I haven't had any other comments through from any other schools. I've just sort of put here what the additional funding is. So as well as the schools block funding, the pupil premium rates are increasing. Schools will still get teachers' pay grant to cover the increase in teachers' pay and pensions as well. So that's a separate grant that will be coming in on top of the schools block allocation. And we've included tables here just to show what the difference is between what schools received last year and this year. And those schools that have seen a reduction from the current year is due to pupil numbers. So there's some schools that had some big drop in pupil numbers, 6 to 15% drop in pupil numbers. And I believe some of those schools have actually asked for a reduction in their PANs, so that should hopefully help. And then I've got the table at the end. We promised that we would show how the 0.5%, how everyone was contributing to the 0.5%. So this table's just showing exactly that, what's happening. So all these schools at the top are already on the minimum per pupil level funding, so we can't take anything off of them, so they're not contributing anything. And the secondary schools are all contributing more, which was what was agreed when we went out to the schools, when Ming and Jonathan went out to get everyone to agree to the block transfer. So what we need is schools to swarm to approve this model, and then we can get it sent to the DFE by the 22nd of January.
Thank you, Catherine. Just a quick question from me. Schools are clear on what additional grants they're going to be getting on top of this, and that the MSAG, the Maintain Schools Additional Grant, is now included in that ALPU figure.
And yeah, that's right.
Yeah. That. Okay, yeah. Just because sometimes if you still think you've got that pot coming through as well, it could look rather rosier than it actually is.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Catherine on the schools block budgets? Or are we happy to move forward to a vote? Okay, if everyone's happy to, if you could vote if you're in agreement with that budget, please. The formal vote with names. Okay, let me just go through the list. Apologies if I miss anyone from here. Can we look at Andy?
Agreed.
Sorry, Al, missed you first of all.
Oh, I don't think Al would vote.
Oh, okay. If you could, Lucianne, I haven't got the list in front of me, that would be great. Thank you.
I agree.
Agreed, thank you.
I agree.
That's correct, Luciano, and we agree.
Yes, thanks very much, Catherine.
Yeah, she had to pop out, yeah.
Yes, agreed, and thank you, Catherine, for all your work with that.
Agreed.
Yes, agreed, Lucianne.
Yes, agree.
Agreed.
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 Yes, agree.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone.
Catherine, you happy to move on to the final Central Schools block budget?
Yes, so that we brought this last time and we had our final figures through. Well, I say final figures through from the DfE, but unfortunately they still haven't agreed the licensing amount. They're still negotiating that with providers. So we haven't got the final amount for licenses. I'll just show you where that is on the table. Just at the bottom here. So we've included a 3% increase on that, and the balance is in the top figure up here. So when we do get the final licenses amount, and we'll just adjust that top figure. So it's just to get your approval that everyone's still all right with that. I think everyone approved it last time, the methodology, but just to say this still isn't final because we still don't know the licensing figure, but we know the final amount that we're getting in is just slightly more than what we got last year. And this is just to contribute towards our statutory duties that we do centrally for schools, like school admissions.
Thank you, Catherine, for that. Lucian, do we vote on that? Do we need to wait till that final information comes through?
I think because everyone approved it last time, I think it's okay that to not have to vote this time. I think we'll just go when we do finally get the final figures, we'll just bring it to schools to the next meeting just to say this is what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is everyone happy to go ahead, and if we vote on that with that slight adjustment that we know will be coming through? I can see various nods around as well. Lucian, could you do me a favour and go through the list again, please? Apologies.
Agreed.
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 Yes.
Agreed.
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 Agree.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Catherine, to you again for the draft early years budget, please.
Yeah, okay. It says draft early years budget, but basically it's just an update on what we found out on the, whatever it was, 18th of December for the final rates that we've got through. So we're meeting the Task and Finish group next week. So we're working through all different models at the moment that we can take to the Task and Finish group to get approval and discussion around the funding for next year. Obviously, the free entitlement hasn't been extended. So let me just get to this table. So this is the rates that we've got this year. These are the rates for next year. So there's this new category for the 9 months to 2-year-old working parents that we've got in there. And the 2-year-old entitlement is extended to working parents of 2-year-olds as well as disadvantaged 2-year-olds. So our income has gone up so much because of that. So it was like about 14 million, it's now 19 million. So it's a lot of money, but we still have to pass 95% through to all the settings for that. Because of the new 2-year-old and under 2-year-old funding, the DfE want us to do termly head counts because they've got no idea what the take up's going to be. So that's a bit of extra work that we have to do to ensure that we've got the right head counts through at each term. The 95% pass-through requirement and the 5% top slice that we have asked for approval for every year that we'll be doing in March, they've now said, the DfE have now said that we can take keep 5% from each of those elements of funding. So we just need to see what funding we need to keep centrally, what we need to use the 5% for, basically. Can it be used towards early years EHCPs and things like that? So we're just investigating what we can do with that 5%. We're meeting next week and we hopefully go through a bit more details to do with it with that group and bring that back in March. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Is that for us to vote on in March when you've been through a bit more detail?
Yeah. So it's just the 5% that the forum needs to vote on.
So we vote today on this 5%?
No, sorry, in March, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Catherine, thank you for all of that. I know it's a lot of work to get all those budgets sorted out and answer all the incoming questions from school. Ian, you have a question?
Yeah, not so much of a question, just a couple of pointers. Obviously, yes, all the streams are liable to a 5% top slice. I would hope that Wokingham are going to be reasonable. We know that there's going to be much more administration, but we are getting an extra 6 to 7 million. So that is a big number that potentially won't go to providers. Also, the 2-year-old funding, and I know we can talk about this next week, Catherine. I've polled a number of providers and they would like to see a unified rate between the working parent and the disadvantaged entitlement, making it a bit simpler from our side. I don't think it will affect outcomes for disadvantaged 2-year-olds, but in terms of maybe budgeting and our administration, a unified rate for 2-year-olds would be simpler from our side.
Yeah, agreed. We don't want to make it so that settings would rather take a working parent 2-year-old rather than a disadvantaged 2-year-old sort of thing. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And you're getting more or less the same. You're getting the same rate for the disadvantaged and the working parents. I don't see the point of actually differentiating for, maybe 10, 20p an hour.
Yeah, thanks, Ian.
Ming, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Deborah. They were very constructive suggestion from Ian. Although my observation, I think it's about under 2-year-olds take up is very significant development. The other day we talked about another forum about how early years will have a longer term impact by taking up by parent, encourage parent to take up all those 3 places is important. So obviously local authority do have a role how to increase our capacity to reach out to parent, to improve communications, any area we can improve on to make sure we maximize the taking up of opportunity that people show our parent, our residents to make use of. So there are more work to do. I have to say that. I know Ian alluded to 5% that can be increased because of the overall positive increase. But this is another area of work. I will also seek school leaders support to, if you have your pupil siblings under 2 years old, this is the new opportunity for parents to take up. We need to communicate to parents. We also to encourage parents to take up any barrier to take up. We will try to support them with cross-cutting working between education, social care, family support, etc. So I think it is a significant development. You have a long-term impact on children, young people, and also school readiness agenda as well. So you're not just add money, not doing anything more. Just like to bring that to this forum's attention.
Thank you, Ming. Kerry, I think you have your hand up.
Something about both of those comments actually. Ming, I think you're right. I think that the take up for me though, my worry is about the take up for the disadvantaged 2-year-olds. I think that for our families who are going back to work or who are on maternity leave will be seeing the news. And we're already seeing the phone calls and hearing the information has already filtered through to parents. I think finding the places, you're very right, will be tricky, but I think that those families will be ahead of the game and they'll be looking for childcare. The difficulty I think will be that with the increased funding for 2-year-olds, those working parents who are either already have children in care or who are now looking for that, they will know and they will gain that information, and they will use that information to book places in nurseries. My big worry would be that the disadvantaged 2-year-olds find out they're eligible later, or the parents aren't as on board. Perhaps they're not as able to find out that information. Lots of those universal services aren't available for families now, so maybe they're not having as many interactions to encourage them. And I worry that those disadvantaged 2-year-olds won't be able to find a place once they find out they're eligible. And so the only benefit of paying a little bit more for the disadvantaged 2-year-olds might mean that some settings are willing to hold places for those children that they're more likely to come last minute. I may be wrong, but for me, I wonder whether if there was some sort of incentive to hold in places for the disadvantaged 2-year-olds. I'd like to hope that all settings want to have a variety of families, but quite honestly, in the world the way it is, if you have 15 families come and say, I want a 2-year-old place, you're going to offer those families places because you need the income. You need bums on seats, to put it quite frankly. So I would be worried then that there would be no places left for the disadvantaged families that aren't so ready and prepared and aware of what's available. But I just, and again, we're not making any decisions, but I wanted to say.
Well, very good thought that can be fed into early years working group, I'm sure.
Thanks, Kerry.
Ian, you have your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I've just obviously echoing what Ming said and also Kerry said. I hear what Kerry's saying. You know, my nursery, we most probably, after Kerry, most probably take more disadvantaged 2-year-olds than most. I guess one of the problems with the 2-year-olds, and I can see what Kerry's saying, is that we have a pull through from babies. So, you know, when we got, you know, come September, our babies section is going to be entirely full with funded parents. But I think one of the biggest things to highlight about this is that, and what Ming said, this is a significant change. We are now going to be funded with state money all the way through our businesses, whereas previously we've had private income up until the age of 3 that we've relied on to cross-subsidise. Now state money is filtering down into what was that private income, and potentially puts a lot of people at risk, because the percentage of our revenues that are going to be state-based are going to increase. I'm looking at maybe 70% of my revenue being from a state source, and that can be a risk to private providers.
And I think what you said, Ian, about the increase in workload for the local authority, very true. But the increase in workload for settings, I'm a big setting, so it probably, and I've got an admin team, and you know, you're quite sizable yourself, Ian, in you know, in the work that you do. But I think for some of the smaller settings, the increase in admin is going to be huge, and the increase in things that they need to do. So I think it's worth bearing in mind that when we look at the percentage too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think some non-monetary sort of collaboration in early years we need to take out of this meeting. I think a lot of thought need to be reflected on, and the new development is significant as we all recognize. So how we can respond collectively, locally, is important. Like I said in another forum, I think in working we don't have family hub model, but I think whether there's something we can inform the broader system-wise approach, it is important. That's something probably beyond school forum we will explore it further outside this meeting.
Okay. Look forward to talking to you, Catherine.
Catherine, sounds like you've got a few detailed meetings coming up, so a lot to cover. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Just looking at the forward programme, our next meeting is on the 13th of March. Sorry, Al, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi there. I just thought this would be a good opportunity to share that this will be Catherine's last schools forum. She's unfortunately leaving the council at the end of February. So, you know, with 14 years service, it will be a huge loss, a lot of expertise, knowledge, parting ways. But I'm sure you'll join me in thanking Catherine for all her hard work over the years. It's fairly new news, so schools haven't formally been informed, but I just thought I'd share that. I thought this was a good opportunity to share with the forum that, yeah, unfortunately, Catherine will be moving on to pursue new challenges.
Oh, thank you for that, Catherine. That's very sad news to hear, having worked with you for the entire time you've been at Woking Borough Council. Personally, thank you for all the hard work you've done and the help you've given me particularly as well. So, Ian, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I'd like to personally thank Catherine. I work with a number of LAs across the country, and as a finance team goes, I have the highest praises for Catherine and the team there.
I'm going to cry in a minute. Thank you. Yeah, I've loved working here, and I'll definitely miss you all. Time for a new challenge for me. I think it's been a long time here, so yeah, time to start something new.
Thank you, Liz. Do you have something to say?
Yeah, just on behalf of the schools, thank you, Catherine. You'll be sorely missed, and you've just been a big credit to the council. So thank you.
Thanks, Liz.
Julia?
Yeah, a big thank you from all the schools in the trust. We really appreciate everything you've done, Catherine. It's a huge loss, and thank you so much.
I'm training everyone up behind me, so don't worry.
Thank you, Catherine. We will bid out our next high needs task and finish group. Are you still there for that?
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. All right, I get a chance to see you then. That's great. Thank you. Thanks, Al, for letting us know about that sad news. But good for Catherine. I hope it's a great success in your future endeavours. The 13th of March for anyone. Can I just whip around quickly and ask if anyone has any other business to discuss? Al, anything from you?
Not
Andy?
from me, thanks.
Nothing from myself, thank you.
Chris?
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Carol?
No thanks, but I'm passing on my thanks to Catherine. Sad news.
Karina? I don't know if she's back yet. Still awake. Darren?
No AOVs from me, but thanks again to Catherine for everything.
Emma?
Nothing from me, but thank you, Catherine. We will miss you in finance. Thank you.
Ian Morgan?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Ian Pittock?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Jen?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Jonathan?
No, nothing from me, thanks.
Catherine?
No, nothing from me.
Kerry?
No, nothing from me, thank you.
Liz?
Nothing, thank you.
Ming?
Nothing from me, just like I said, from education department's point of view, I mean, Catherine's contribution is so huge, and she'll be truly missed. And personally, I really I rely on Catherine so much, but it's sad news for us, but it's probably good for Catherine. Thank you very much, Catherine, for all your help.
Julia?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Nikki?
No, thank you.
Prue?
No, thank you, except to thank everybody for their attention and everything today. And I'll see you in March.
Thank you, Prue. And Sarah?
Thank you. And thank you to Catherine. We'll miss you and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. See you all in March.